Yeah. So having said that, yes, I'll try to give the POCs by today. So one is ready and another one is I'm preparing. Okay, and that is one thing. And additionally, what we're going to see today is like in the last sessions and last couple of sections, we have seen various scopes like for each, parallel for each, asynchronous scope until successful cache, and prior to that scheduler, object store, all these stuffs, right? So now we're gonna see one interesting, one more important concept. It is called a batch processing. So batch processing is most important processing technique. So which is not only being used in MuleSoft, it is being used in multiple technologies. So batch processing, when I say about batch processing, so the name itself clearly says what is batch processing. So I'm going to process something. Instead of processing it one by one, I'm going to process it as a batch. Means a few elements at once, and in the next iteration, few other elements in that case, right? So similar to for each. So what we have seen last class, we have seen for each and parallel for each, right? And so we also have seen what is the very major difference between parallel for each and the for each. So how many workers will be assigned in case of we are using parallel for each, and how many workers we will be assigned if we use for each. So all this we have seen in the last classes, right? So a parallel for each also, it's a kind of, I cannot say it's a batch processing, but it will process multiple record at once. So for each at any point of time, at any instance, it will process one record at once. Whereas the parallel for each, it processes multiple record at once, but not as a batch again. So that will be processing. For example, I'm going to process 5 records at once. So 5 workers will be created, and all 5 workers will be assigned with one record, right? Whereas it is not the case with batch processing. So I'm going to talk about batch processing and gonna do some exercises with batch processing, and we'll see how batch processing is different from parallel for each or for each. Right. So when we see for batch processing, then we have to know 4 important concepts, not concepts like terms. So one is batch step and batch aggregator. So these two are important elements in the batch processing: batch step and batch aggregator. Okay, I'll tell what is batch step and what is aggregator slowly. And then we have something called batch block size and aggregator size. Right. Whereas when we see parallel for each, we have seen something called maximum concurrency, right? So maximum concurrency will say how many like a parallel processing can happen, right? And here we have something called a batch block size and aggregator size. I'll tell all these things. So these 4 are important elements of batch processing. Okay. So now quickly get into Anypoint Studio. As I was telling, batch processing helps you to process records as a batches. So you can define what can be the batch size. Okay, I have some thousands of records. So I wanted to process all the thousands of records. Maybe I wanted to insert all the thousands of records into database, or maybe fetch and process thousands of records, right? And then I'm going to divide the entire payload or entire records into some batches. For example, if I give 100 per batch, so what will happen? I have 1,000 records. So 1,000 records will be split into 10 different subsystems. So each sub elements or subsystem will have 100 records. Okay. So that 100 records will be processed as a single batch. So that will be processed in the first iteration, and the second iteration it will process next to 200, next to 100. Likewise, it goes. Okay. And in batch processing also, we can insert data one by one, and we can insert data all together at once. Okay. Yeah, I have prepared a flow, or else I'll better bring a new one. HTTP. And I'm going to search for batch processing. So I have something called batch aggregator, batch step, and batch job as well, right? First, I have to drag and drop batch job. Again, batch job is a scope again. So similar to what we have seen for a cache until successful for each, parallel for each, this is also another scope. And so inside my main flow, I have a batch processing, and this batch processing is having 3 major sections, or else I can say 2 major sections. One is a batch step, okay, and another one is on complete. And there is something called batch aggregator also. I can drag and drop batch aggregator if I want. See aggregator, or else I can put it here as well. Right. At present, I don't want to have an aggregator. I'll just do step-by-step processing first. Okay. So I have two major sections. One is batch step and another one is on complete. So what basically happens is my execution will come to batch processing this scope, and this scope will split my payload into different batches. And first batch will be sent to this scope. And once it is sent to this scope, it will come to this processor, and whatever I have configured here in this processor will happen one after another. Whatever I whatever I configure here, that will happen all at once. So processor is like a step-by-step processing, and aggregator is a combined processing. So that is the important difference between these two. So inside batch step, we will be having processors and aggregator. So in processors also you can insert, in aggregator also you can insert. Whereas if you insert in processors, it will insert one by one. Aggregator will insert as a single batch. Okay. And upon completion, there is something called on complete. So in this on complete, it will say whether whatever I have configured here or whatever I have done here, is that completed or not. If it is completed, whatever message I'm going to print here or whatever logic I'm going to write in this section, that will be executed. If there is a failure here itself, then this on complete also will not get executed. And this is what a simple batch processing, batch job flow. And I'm going to configure the HTTP listener in such way. I'm going to use the same DB 8081. Sorry, port. I'm going to say batch processing. So the same concept I have taken, like I'm going to insert the data. So I'm going to send request from my payload. I'm going to insert it. So for that, I have to have an insert operation. And I'm going to place two logger for you. So I have to configure this one. The configuration is the same, what we have done earlier. I'm going to take the same query here. Okay, here it is showing error. Let us see what is the error. Okay. So I have done insert configuration. Then I'm going to log here as well. Maybe I can log batch processing. Okay, then I have two configuration elements here in this batch processing. There is one configuration element for batch job and another one is for batch step. So firstly, I'll click on this batch job. Then let me see what are all available. So I have something called a display name. Let me change it. It's having a conflict. And few other configurations like maximum failure records. Okay, this means I'll talk about this one later. Now we have something importantly called batch block size. So this is what I was saying about batch block size is nothing but I'm giving a huge payload. So that payload, how many batches it has to divide, that will be depend on the batch block size what I'm giving. So 1,000 records, for example, I have given batch block size as 100. So it will take 100 records per batch. So every batch will have 100 records. So once it picked 100 records, then it will come inside and execute this. Then again goes back, then fetches the second 100 record, then comes in. Okay, that is what here this batch block size and maximum concurrency. Yes, you know, maximum concurrency, like how many threads can be created. So here also we can do parallel processing. What we have done in for each, the same we can perform here by mentioning the maximum concurrency. Okay, and job instance ID, like for each job you can give your ID. Maybe for any reference, first 100 job, this is what my ID. Likewise, you can configure your job instance ID, and then target variable, like this is nothing but what we have seen, right? Whether it should be in a payload or it should be a variable, right? And don't change any of this, just to configure batch block size, nothing else. And also this ordered sequential also I'm not going to change. It will have few other like round robin and other mechanism. Like by default it will be ordered sequential, then records will be inserted in a proper order. Or else if I give this one, right, round robin, what will happen is I have given round robin and maximum concurrency. For example, if I give some of 40, then 40 threads will be created and the first record will not be inserted. That is not guaranteed that first record will be inserted first. So it can insert in any order, right? So I'm not going to give that. I'm going to give the default one. Ordered sequential means first will be inserted, then second will be inserted like this. I'm not going to give concurrency also. It may eat my memory as well. So simple configuration, nothing else. I have just to configure the batch block size. Firstly, we'll try to have batch block size as 100. Then we execute and see. Then we will try to reduce the batch block size and see what happens. And here in this batch step also you have to configure something called accept expression, like that is okay, and accept policy. So there are two types of policy: only failures and only failures and no failures. So by default it will be no failures, whichever, like in the sense like I'm giving my request, so whichever is not failed, those record will be processed, means all the success record will be processed. If there is, if I'm configuring like only failure, what will happen is, so record whichever is failed in the insertion process, right? For example, I have one batch process, one batch step here, and similar to that I can have one more batch step there. The same operation, same insert, I can do it here, right? So what will happen is basically in this batch step, I'm going to give no failure, which means I give 100 payloads, 100 records. So all the 100 records will be processed due to some reason. Okay, due to some reason out of 100, if 5 is not processed, okay, so that 5 will not, means you may ask a question whether the remaining 95 will be processed or not. Yes, remaining 95 will be processed, and all 5 failures will be maintained in a separate queue. Okay, and what will happen is, if I have another batch step next to that, adjacent to that, okay, where I'm going to configure like only failures. So this time what will happen? No, whatever it returned as a failure record, so that will be processed here. So I have two batch step, one for all and another one for failure alone. So here I'm executing all the records. For some reason, like I'm not able to execute all the records, few records failed. And those records will be maintained in a memory, and those records will be processed here if I give this one as a only failure policy. Right. So in this way, you can achieve like without losing any data. And you can have one more batch step here next to that. That also you can configure like only failure, right? And if anything missed out here, that can be handled there. So likewise, you can plan. That is the benefit of mentioning on failure or no failure. Right now, I'm going to give no failure only. I'm going to process all the records. Okay. Let me deploy and show you how it works. So I have a request which have array elements. So that array is having three objects. Firstly, let me try to change the number. Okay, so let me try to hit the request and see. It's failing in the database. I have not turned on my database. Sometimes you have to do clean your project as well. So how to do? Go to project tool menu, and then there is something called clean. So I have single project in my workspace, so that project is visible for me. And if I have more than one project, all the projects will be listed for you. You can select which project you want to clean. So I have selected this project and clean. Clean. I am not having that error. That actually was not an error, but it was just popping up at that moment, and now it is not there. In fact, this is not an error, but still it is showing. Maybe once I restart my studio, it won't pop up again. Okay, so it came here. Main process completed. What is happening now? Okay, so what happens is I have just to trigger the request and my request came inside my batch processing. Okay, so I'm able to see few logs printed and a few logs are my custom logs and few are system logs. So let me show one by one. Um, yeah, so the first log says created instance, nothing but this is the instance ID, which I was telling about sometimes before. Each batch processor will have an instant ID, right? So I have not given any instance ID. So by its own, it is creating its own instance. Okay, that ID is visible. So that's what it's showing, created instance, and this is the instant ID for the batch job BP. BP is nothing but this batch job. Okay, so it created one instance for that as a first message, and we are reading it. And now it is saying starting load phase for instance, the same instance ID here of the job BP. And then it is saying finished loading phases for instance, the same instance ID, and a job BP, 3 records were loaded. So now I have sent 3 records from my request, and I have mentioned this size is 100, right? The batch size is 100. So since like 3 is lesser than 100, it took all the records and those records were loaded. It is ready to process now. And now one more log says started execution of the instance, and this is the instance ID, and for the job BP, this is the BP batch processing scopes name that I have mentioned. And it says main process completed, which is nothing but this logger, right? And this transfer message success, even without even without executing this one, I have got it in my response. How it happened is, so this batch processing also will happen in parallel. So this is also a kind of asynchronous. So what will happen is once it is reached here, it will trigger a request to this logger and it will parallel process this as well. So it will not, this logger or this transfer message will not wait for the scope to be completed since it is a asynchronous scope, right? And this will process in separate thread and this will be processed in different thread. So this thread executed completely. That is the reason we have got success message, and we were able to see this logger also printed here in the console. Right now our batch step is going to execute. Okay, so we'll see what happens. Let me go to database and show if the record is exist for that ID. Let me try to reach the, let me try to get 2345 is the ID which I'm trying to insert now, which does not exist at present. Okay, so this is a different one, not this table. Yeah, 2345. So no record at this moment. I'm going to process it. Okay, processed. I'm able to see the record inserted. Okay, now this logger will be printed. Let me clear the console. That logger printed saying insert inside batch processing step. Okay, so this time it is executing or inserting the data one after another, right? So that is what we are seeing. So as I have told, whatever we put it in batch step, it will process step by step, one by one. Second data inserted, third data inserted, then it comes to on complete log, then comes out of the flow, right? So better for better visualization, I'll do one thing. I'll add one more logger in front of this and show how this actually executes. Before batch processing. And this one. And here inside batch process is complete. Okay, and this one inside batch processing, and this one batch processing completed. Okay, this time what I'll do, I'll try to reduce the batch size here. Instead of 100, now I'm going to give something 2, and I'm going to give 4 payload in my request, or maybe 5 I'll give. I have 5 records at present. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 records I have. And I have changed the batch size here, block size as a 2. Let us see whether it is taking all 5 or just 2. It is deployed. I'm going to trigger the job. I'll add a breakpoint here better. So first this logger gonna get executed. Let me clear the console for you. Yes, that logger executed, and then here it came. What happens? See, even without getting inside that and processing it, it went to the next connector, which means it triggered 2 requests at once. So it cannot show you that execution or compiler is in 2 different places, right? So that is why it is showing like this. But backend, what is happening after this logger? This also gets triggered, and parallelly this also gets triggered. So how we can understand that? Just to go here and see what is the worker assigned, or what is the, yeah. So here it is 126, right? For before batch processing, right? Nothing but this logger. This logger executed with this ID 127, and now all these, like nothing but system logs, are used 107. Nothing but for this batch processing, it is going to take 107, and for other steps, other outside processing, it is going to take 126. And now this logger will get executed with 126 if 126 is available. Batch processing. Again, okay, it is not available. So I think it is shuffling between these workers. But anyway, what happened is it is going to get executed parallelly. And then before batch processing, it executed, and these are the system logs. And there is, I think I have done a mistake. It should take just 2 records, but it is taking 5 records. Let me see one more time what I have done. It actually should take 2 records, but it took 5 records. We'll see what happens now. Okay, you might have observed a small difference. Like I think I have told in a wrong way. What happens is, like, it takes here whatever I have given just to 2. So this block size is not for picking the entire payload. So it picks the entire payload, and from there to this batch step, it is just sending two records. Okay, that is the reason these 2 records inserted first, and logger it completes, executes, then it goes out again, gets into batch step, then picks 2 more records and process it. So that is how it is working. Let me do it one more time for you. I think I have told in a wrong way. Yeah. To get the request, let me go step by step. Before batch processing, and now it's going to execute this logger which says completed, or after log, or it is going to get executed. And in meantime, we are able to see, like, instance got created, and that instance is having 5 records, means whatever records I have given, all the records it took, and now it is going to split by now only. So it took 5 records, and it is going to split those 5 records into two different batches. Like each record will have 2, in fact. So right. So, and before that, it executes this one, this logger, and then comes back, right? Since it is parallel processing, so as I have told, it is a parallel processing. It triggered request here, and it triggered request here also. So this will execute separately, and this will get execute separately. So our logs may say might be like 1 step ahead and 1 step below maybe. Means since it is a parallel processing, this will execute and this will execute. So the log will not be in a proper order. Okay. And now I got into this particular batch step, and I'm going to insert data one by one only. So what is going to happen right? After batch processing, this got executed. Now it is going to insert the first record and the second record, right? It executed those two records, and now this is going to execute this logger. Right? Again, there is a miss. I think it is behaving in such way how many block size I'm giving, so that many blocks or that many batches it is creating. So I was in assumption like it will take that many records and it will create a batch, but I think it is behaving in such way. What is the batch block size I'm giving? That many blocks it is creating. So I have 5 records. I have given 3 batch block size. So I think 3 blocks would got created, and the first 2 blocks will have two records, and the third block will have 1 record, I believe so. Because in real time, actually, we won't use this particular single batch step. So I just demonstrated this one for your understanding to know this how it works. Okay. So if my assumption is correct, like it will execute 2 times. Yeah. So that is what it is happening. Primary key issue. Okay. Yes. So that is what, like, what exactly happened is I have given this thing batch block size as 3 here. So what happened? It created 3 blocks, and I have given a 5 records. So equally it will split. So first 2 record it split and put it in block 1, and second 2 record it put it in block 2. And then it search for other records. There is 1 record only available that will be put in a block 3. So it will execute this batch step, right, in such way like first block will be executed and second block and third block, like that. Okay. And that is what happened. But earlier I have told this block size is like nothing but how many records per block. So that is not correct, just a mistake from my side. Yes, so this block size is nothing but how many blocks I'm going to use for this processing. So that I'm specifying here. So a number of blocks I'm specifying, so it will divide the request payload into that many blocks and then segregate sends the execution request. Okay, and this is what it works with the step processing, batch step processing. And I have also told like there is something called aggregator, batch step aggregator, right? So how that works, let me demonstrate that as well. Now I don't have anything in my batch step. I just have a write message saying before batch aggregator. That's it. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to process anything. This is the one which we will be using very frequently, because this is the sole purpose of using a batch processing. Okay. Now simply I'm just trying to read the payload and save it in a payload only. And here I have a batch step, and in this batch step I have a logger saying before batch aggregator. Okay, and then this aggregator, how did I get? I have got this aggregator by just dragging and dropping this aggregator from the palette section. The same flow. Okay. Same flow, we can use it better. Before batch processing, inside batch processing. Now in this aggregator, I'm going to add data, and I'm going to insert the data as a bulk, not as a single data. So I have to drag and drop this bulk insert option. Not the common one, like earlier we have used insert, and now I'm going to use it bulk insert. Okay, and then I'm going to revert back my batch size. Let it be the default one. And here it is on complete. I'm going to say the same, other logs and all remain same, and also I'm going to say success. Now let me try to take query from here. DB connector I have to select. Okay. This query is nothing, a simple insert operation. Insert, like all are dynamic. Insert employee ID, and then phone number, then its value. Okay, I'm not going to change anything. Okay, and here there is something called aggregator size. So this is what I was telling about aggregator size. So I'll tell what is the use of aggregator size. At present, I'm not going to have any aggregator size, or else let me have a default one. Let me see what I have configured here. I think I have configured 3. Let me try to deploy without giving any aggregator size and see what happens. Then after that, I'll give some aggregator size. Then we'll see what is it. If you see this error message saying on the following field must be, set size, like it is expecting something as a size. Okay, firstly I'm going to give 100 only. What are the batch size? I'm giving the same here, nothing else. Let me save and show what happens. Record exist. Okay, I have to delete them. Okay. It is executing parallelly. As we know, like this batch step will execute 5 times because I have 5 records in my request payload, and step will execute one after another. Then this bulk insert, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 records I have at present. Unable to convert. Okay, it is expecting mapper Java. Okay. So then I have to have a transform message which I have to convert JSON to Java format. It is expecting something like a object stream. Let me try to convert to Java. So you just to see what is the payload at present. I'm giving a payload in JSON format and it is of this type. Okay. And after that, like my payload at present, it is not even though like it is JSON payload and starting with curly brace, it is not considering that as an array. That is the reason in the payload I have a single block, right? After converting to Java, right, it got changed to array list. Okay. And this batch processing will expect array list payload, okay, to do bulk insert. So that is the reason I just converted to Java. And after converting to Java, I'm able to see like there are 6 indexes, starts with 0. First index will have the first employee information. Second index will have second employee information likewise. Okay. And since there are 6 records, this logger at present will get executed 6 times. I'm going to erase this log. 1, 6 times it would have got executed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? And now I get into batch processing, a batch aggregator. It executed once only. It executed just one time only. It did not execute multiple times, and returns me with a payload saying total record 6, successful record 6. So it says like all 6 are inserted successfully. All these are inserted within a single instance, like it just executed that one time only, and all the 6 got executed. Right? And now let me add one more thing here to you. Say aggregator. And this time, okay, I'm not going to change anything. Let it be. This time I'm going to give some 12 records, and all 12 records in the sense like just 6 records with the old data, nothing but duplicate keys, and 6 I'm going to give newly. Or else like let me give some 8 records, and out of 8 like 6 are duplicate and 2 are new. This time I'm going to change this to 570 and 571. So these 2 are new records and other are old records, which was already inserted and throws error from the database. Let me show how it executes this time. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. 8 times executed. We will be able to see the logs also 8 times. Right. And now this bulk insert going to execute. So I have one more logger in the aggregator. So whenever this bulk insert executes, this logger also should get executed. Just to show you like how many times it is getting executed. Let me clear the console. Okay, bulk insert throw some error, then came out to the on complete. Okay, and then I got a response to my request. Again, let me try to insert one more time. I'm able to see the cause for a duplicate entry 560 Amit for this, primary key issue. And what happened is it just to try to execute the first record and nothing but 560, and that record is already existed like 555. This one 560. It try to execute this one and which already exists, so it throws me an error. And let me see if a 580 and 581 got inserted or not. Which means one row affected. What happened is it was already inserted, right? And now let me try to delete 181 as well. One row affected, which means it was existed and it is deleted. Now if I try to delete it, it will give 0, right? Which means it got inserted. Now let me try to insert or execute this again one more time. So better I'll put it in a very simple way. I have just a 3 records, 560. Let me see 560 exists in the database or not. $560 exists. Let me try to see if 580 exists. 580 does not exist. Okay, let me remove 581 also. Just I have 2 records. One is existing, another one is non-existing. Okay. Let me go to database and see this time 580 got inserted, which means irrespective of exposing or popping up with the error, it is inserting. So we just experienced, I have just to try to insert 2 data, one which exists and another one does not exist. And we all know in my database, if I try to insert the same data which already exists with the same employee ID, it throws error, right? So the same happened here as well. And I have 2 records. So those 2 records, one is existing, another one is non-existing. So one is failed and another one is non-failure, right? So what happens is it will insert the data which does not exist and it throws error for the data which exists. Okay. So that is what the beauty of batch processing. So I have given 100 records. For 100 records, 95 did not throw any error. So all the 95 get successfully executed. 5 throws error and those 5 only will be ignored. In the sense like it will not block the entire transaction. So in that way, you can assume like batch processing is a kind of stuff which will execute all the non-failure records and it will eliminate all the failure records separately. It will not interrupt or it will not cancel the entire transaction. Okay. So just to brief, let me iterate one more time, or else I'll show something like there is something called batch aggregator. Let me try to put this aggregator size as just 2 and show you what happens. Right. Let me try to delete 560 as well, 580 and both. Now I don't have any record, 560 and 580 I don't have. Let me try to add some more in my request payload. Let me add 2 more elements, 2 more records. 560, 570, 580 and 590 maybe. We can set 4 records. Just to one change I have done, nothing but aggregator size I have changed and the batch size I'm still maintaining as 100 only. I have just to change this aggregator size. And earlier it was executing once, right? Since I have not mentioned the aggregator size earlier, right? It was executing once and now I have changed to 2. Amit already exists. Okay. If you would have observed, it executed twice, right? Since I have changed the aggregator sizes to, so 2 records it is picking and that 2 records will be executed in the first aggregation and the second 2 will be picked and second 2 will be inserted. Let me try to do it one more time by deleting all properly this time. 560, I'll delete 570, I'll delete 560 deleted, 570 deleted, 580 deleted, 590 as well. So all the four I have all the four records I have deleted. Trying to insert newly. Okay, this insert going to happen. Executed successfully. Right, let me go and check in the database. Okay, this bulk insert executed successfully. Let me try and see if data exists or not. Let me try to search for 560 first. Yes, I'm able to get 560. Let me try to check for 570. Yes, 570 also present. Let me try to look for 580. Does not exist. The reason is it executed once, and this executed with the aggregator size 2. So first 2 records picked and those 2 record processed. Now it is going to execute one more time. This time it inserted 580 and 590. 580 present and 590 also should be available. And now it comes out of this, and this on complete will be executed, then flow get terminated. So this is how it works. Okay, let me recap what we have seen. The key takeaway from batch processing is, like, we all should be aware, like, batch processing will insert more than a single record at once. Okay, whereas any other connector will not have this capability. Only batch processing have this capability to insert or process multiple records. Okay, and that also we have two types. One is step processing, another one is aggregated processing. Okay, so in step, ideally, like in real time, we will not insert data in step processing. Okay, in step processing we will not do it, because in step processing it will insert one by one, and batch aggregator it will insert like a multiple at once. Okay, multiple, not in parallel, multiple at once. Okay, and what happens is this batch aggregator, it executes depending upon something called batch aggregator size, which we are configuring here. So what size I'm giving, so that many records will be picked for first iteration, and following iteration will have the same number of records. Aggregator size I have just given 2. Okay, and on top of that we have something called a batch block size. So I'm putting it clearly this time. Batch block, sorry, excuse me. So batch block size is nothing but like how many blocks we are going to create. It is not firstly I have told how many records it is going to split. That is wrong. So the correct statement is like how many blocks it is going to create. Okay, so a number of records I'm giving, it will prepare these many blocks. Since I have given 100, so 100 blocks it prepares. And if it is more than 100 records, right, so records will be split in such way like which can accommodate all the 100 blocks. Okay. And we have seen few advantages using batch processing. Nothing but batch aggregator, I have given a payload which have some existing data and which does not have existing data as well, which means like it some records may throw failure response, and some records may throw success response, right? So irrespective of success or failure, it try to process everything, and whichever is not throwing a failure, means whichever is possibly inserting, so that will be inserted, and whichever throws error, those error message we are getting in response. That's it. It is not canceling or it is not terminating the entire transaction. Okay, so this is what all about batch processing. Just to try to do a replica of the same in your machine and come up with any doubts. Okay, and if you expect me to have one more session on the batch processing, we are happy to have one more session also, since I have started saying this batch block size in a wrong statement in the start. And now if that is not clear, if you want me to have this session one more time, we can have it tomorrow, or else like we'll move to some other interesting topic called error handling, which will take the next 2 or 3 days to complete. So we will be focusing on error handling, since we have covered most of the palettes here, whatever palettes we wanted to see as the most important palettes. So those palettes and all we have covered mostly. Since we have covered almost closer to most of the palettes, right? We'll move to error handling. There is something called error handling. We will see that. that is also equally important. Like error handling also will be there in all the interview questions. So we have 4 connectors in error handling. So we will take one by one. We will spend some 3 days to complete this error handling. So that is what I have planned for today. If no questions, like we can wind up and join back tomorrow. Please let me know maybe tomorrow also before start of the class if you want me to have the session one more time on the batch processing. If it is not clear, else we will move to error handling tomorrow. Okay, thank you guys. Thanks for joining. But please let me know whether we should have one more session or is that okay for you? Thank you guys. See you tomorrow.